And so what I am working on is a program in which we have three priorities. One, deep and rapid emissions reduction. Two, greenhouse gas removal at scale, by which I mean 30 to 40 billion tons a year. That is the amount of carbon dioxide we're emitting per annum today in carbon terms. And I'm also saying we have to do what looks like an impossible task, find out whether we can develop technologies to refreeze the poles to stop what is happening up there.
And how hopeful are you, Sir David, that we could do those things?
I was a diplomat leading the climate negotiations in the Foreign Office before, and I'm still working through those connections to see if we can't get a global climate alliance of nations and states to back those three objectives. Now, you may say that that sounds like an impossible task. In the run-up to Paris, I was pushing for something that was called Mission Innovation. Mission Innovation this year is spending $22 billion of public money on research and development into clean energy technologies. That was achieved in exactly the same way, just asking countries to volunteer to come forward and join Mission Innovation. And that's really the hope I have, is that that has been successful. We have an enormous challenge ahead of us. I am reasonably hopeful.
The thing that makes me hopeful is the Sustainable Development Goals. Countries have signed up, at least in principle, to the 17 SDGs. From my perspective, looking at health equity, at least 11 of those 17 goals are determinants of health and health equity. So if we can start to get countries to honor those commitments to take action on the SDGs, then we can make real progress.
30 years of failure have meant that we now have to align profound social change with the high emitters with technology change, and only then do you have an outside chance of 2 degrees centigrade. I think it's possible to avoid that. Yes, I think it is possible.
A, we can do the impossible, and B, we have to.
Within the space of the last couple of months, you've seen the evidence of what you're seeing: the world without shipping, without aviation, without motor cars. You're seeing emissions drop to near zero. And what I wanted to know was, how much are you going to be able to learn from this in the next few weeks before we drift back into comparative normality?
The climate crisis is still a very real and urgent crisis. But as we try and recover from COVID-19, is there a danger that we're going to be bailing out business as usual rather than worrying about carbon emissions?
Do we have to question the basis, think what we measure and why, and develop a better system using the best thinking of us all? And I think you have to have that through a global citizens' assembly, because you can trust people to come up with good solutions.
I think that we need to make the argument that any stimulus that is put forward needs to be channeled through a Green New Deal. We need to see this crisis as also an opportunity to prevent further crises down the road. Okay.
But we have to be careful. Let's say, is there any way to ensure well-being and ongoing income for the employees that would actually also help us start to make a response to the climate change agenda? So there is plenty of opportunity to describe a climate progressive world, partly which I think we should be feeding into in the response to COVID-19, which is good for most people in society. But it will mean profound changes for how I live my life, for the material quality of lives of people like me who have for a long time abused the resource production of our society, whether that's labour and indeed access to ecological resources.
There's actually quite a big opportunity here. The low carbon economy, we know, is quite a capital intensive economy. Wind farms are expensive to build and next to free to run. Electric cars are currently still expensive, but next to free to run. So the clean technologies we have tend to need a lot of upfront capital. We are now reaching a point in time where capital will be cheap. That's sort of the macroeconomic response to a crisis like this. One of the other things that will happen probably is more quantitative easing. It's possible and in fact not very difficult to do green quantitative easing, where you buy up the bonds of the clean economy rather than the bonds of the dirty economy.
It's not that people are good now. People have always been good. And we have to find some way to key into that goodness in society. And actually what this has done and what this has shown us is that the world is full of many good people. So we need to engage much more with a wider constituency of people that can try to not being climate change as the story itself, but I mean the story about what is a good world, what is a good life that meets sort of Michael's criteria and resolves the climate change issues and all those other things like that. It's not about solving a problem piece by piece. It's about looking at the system as a whole.
We human beings are always worried about changes in behavior. And here we've had a change in behavior imposed on us by the COVID-19 pandemic. These changes in behavior include a number of things that we will learn, and we are learning as we are today. We will learn we can manage. Travel, whether it's by air or road, is going to be significantly reduced.
Imagine that our Chancellor of the Exchequer did what the New Zealand Minister of Finance did and said, my next budget is going to be about a well-being approach, but to have a well-being economy. That's what I'd like to see emerge from this crisis.
This is an excellent time to make sure we put in the policies that help us not go back. So why not actually introduce a frequent flyer levy?
So what the COVID crisis exposes is that we can do things differently. We must not go back to the status quo ante. We cannot do that. And that relates to my twin concerns of inequality and climate change. As we emerge from this crisis, as people have said, this is not the way to solve environmental pollution or climate change, to shut down the economy. But as we emerge from it, we've exposed to ourselves that we can do things differently, and we have to.
Why not, at this moment, actually stop the road building program in the UK? So put the things in place in policy now to help reinforce the good things that are coming out of COVID-19.
And finally, if I may, I'd like to close with a quote from Lord Nicholas Stern, the former chief economist to the World Bank. He said, "Humanity is at a crossroads. This could be the best of centuries or the worst of centuries." Of course, as a country, we've come through difficult times in the past, not by appeasing threats, but by facing up to them. Let's not underestimate the influence of the people on this call collectively to shape the path that we now take. Please keep this conversation going. You can reach us by emailing media@planb.earth. And thank you so much to everyone who has battled through the challenges to join us online today. Thank you and good afternoon.